Hey guys, what's up? It's Andy here, back at you with another video, and today we have an interview with Stefan Bezuidenhout, who is a head attorney at Attorney 420. You can also check out their link below in the description. Basically, today we're going to be discussing offtake agreements. Now, that's a part of legal cannabis in South Africa that is, according to Stefan, causing a few issues. You can't sell cannabis legally in South Africa as a medicinal product because cannabis isn't yet registered as a medicinal product. Hence, you have to sell it overseas or to a buyer overseas. Now, that whole process comes with a whole line of issues, whether it's the risk in terms of knowing when your product is transfers sort of ownership, how the customer expects it to arrive, the standards, the qualities, and Stefan also brings in a few of the prices that you can expect to get. Though that's not the focus, the main focus is just understanding a little bit more about that final step. If you're interested in getting into the licensed cannabis space, you can speak to us. We can point you in the right direction. And this is just about understanding that it's a little bit more than just growing. It's a little bit more than just having a facility. There's actually a big part of it is the buying process / selling process, depending on which side you're looking at it. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to jump over to Stefan. And last thing, please make sure to like and subscribe. Welcome, Stefan. Thanks so much for joining us today on another interview and for bringing a little bit of information about offtake agreements. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Andrew. I'm well, thanks. And how are you? And thank you so much again to the team for having me. It's always a pleasure being here and educating.
Yeah, I'm doing well, and it's always a pleasure having you. So we've been speaking a little bit about offtake agreements and how they come into play, because obviously guys at home are growing. They're growing. Well, the licensed guys are growing. They're getting a license, then they're growing, and then they're harvesting, and now they're sitting with a product. And it's a very I assume, and from what we've spoken about, it's a very commonly overlooked part of the process is this contract which stipulates the sale of cannabis, because if I'm not mistaken, cannabis can't be sold in South Africa just of yet, unless it's for medical purpose. But I actually think they actually don't even want medical cannabis being sold in South Africa. They want it to be a international buyer, if that's correct.
So locally it is still a bit difficult because cannabis isn't a registered medicine in South Africa. As soon as cannabis is a registered medicine, then all these licensed facilities will be able to start supplying to your local pharmacies like Clicks and Dischem. And with a proper either card or prescription, you would be able to go get your medicinal cannabis. But yes, for now, if you get a license to medicinal or to cultivate medicinal cannabis, it is for export purposes. And then once you apply for your, Section 22C1B cannabis cultivation license, one of the documents that you need to submit and would be part of your inspection is what we call a letter of intent. So you have to actually show that you do at least already have an interested party in some of your product. The only problem is those documents are not enforceable. So it's non-binding, and therefore it's just as the name says, it just creates the intention. And the letter of intent will also refer in itself to be replaced later with a formal offtake agreement. So it could easily happen that the company that you have used to enter into this letter of intent for purposes of getting your license has now decided that they cannot or won't use you as the supplier, or the quality of the product that you have grown wasn't up to their standard. So does that now mean that you have to completely destroy the product? Or does that not mean there is another legal buyer out there that you can perhaps now rather sell this batch to? So yeah, it's a bit more difficult because the letter of intent isn't a guarantee for you to selling your cannabis. And then at the end of the day, you're sitting with a whole bunch of cannabis. And once you're then into the offtake market, you can also easily see how much people are not satisfied with the prices that they get. There are a lot of opportunities opportunistic buyers out there that would naturally decrease the price just because the products may be coming from South Africa. And also your facility will also play a part in that. If you've just got the normal GACP license versus international EU GMP accreditation, you'd naturally be able to charge more for those kinds of products. So companies do really need to be careful and ensure that when they do their financial models and business plans, that they also make provision for the offtake and the space that it creates, and that not all products are going to turn out necessarily to the expectation that you were hoping, and also to the buyer. And then what is your options available to you?
So I'm getting the feeling it's a lot more important than just having a buyer. It sounds like there's enough buyers in the market, but not enough buyers that are able to with the regulation. So there's enough buyers, but then maybe the people in the sellers aren't necessarily getting their ducks in a row in terms of risk and having the contracts in place, and then everyone being on the same page.
And also, cannabis isn't just necessarily cannabis. The two purchasers, the one in Canada and the one in Israel, they might want two totally different products. So now we're also at a weird space where the licensed cultivator is in a position to legally grow and export, but what is he supposed to grow? That's why you've got a letter of intent for an eventual off-taker to say that if you meet these standards, this is what's going to happen. So in a perfect world, once you do your letter of intent, let's say with company ABC, now months down the line, you only started to cultivation. So only 1 year after that letter of intent is the actual formal off-take agreement now being entered into. So you can imagine how hard it already is finding a company willing to wait that long and give you this intention of theirs on black and white. But now, let's say you do manage to cross that hurdle. Now you have cultivated. Now you have to do a COA, a certificate of analysis on the product. So you send 2 to 10 grams, as a sample to NAVs. They do the testing for you. Now you've got a certificate of analysis that you can supply to your offtake. They are happy with the certificate of analysis, that there's no heavy metals in the product, that the THC level is at the minimum that they require. Then they will also require a sample. They're not going to buy a half a ton of cannabis based on your single little certificate of analysis. So obviously you'd have to send them pictures, samples. That takes quite a while for them to get there, because it is still a medicinal product that you're transporting. So if you want to, you're going to have to jump through all the hoops of that as well. Then they have the sample on their side, and once they are satisfied and they've done their certificate of analysis on the samples that you've provided to them, now are we only entering a formal offtake agreement, which will set out the pricing, the quantity, the delivery methods, how risk will play into factor, who's going to take accountability at every stage of transport, and that sets out your more formal offtake. So it is quite difficult, because a lot of people have also now been in a position where they're struggling to get offtake, and then once an offtaker comes along the way, it's at a price that they deem won't be profitable to actually use that offtake. They would rather continue looking for someone willing to pay for, $2,000 or $3,000 US per kilogram instead of the 1.6 that they could have got. So yeah, and on that note, offtake prices really do differ. And as soon as you have got your license, you are free to openly go and search, for legal buyers, and they all will naturally have different prices. As I said, we've had off-takers that's only willing to pay $1,000 US per kilogram for THC containing 20% or more. We've had off-takers that will pay you $2,200 US of just 18% THC or more. Your hemp is pretty standard. If looking at hemp offtakes, you can be certain you're going to get around $200 per kilogram in terms of the hemp industry. But the medicinal market just fluctuates, and it's going to vary. You're going to have to be very certain of your offtake to be able to rely on it in terms of that financial model. And as in your mind, you were going to supply them for the next 3 years, and it doesn't always work like that.
So I suppose you've written up a lot of offtake agreements. What are the most important parts that you see people overlooking? I mean, you only briefly mentioned risk, but if you can dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think obviously everyone's used to, you'll have the quantity, you'll have the price, and you'll have the minimum requirements of the product. But a lot of people don't know the ins and outs surrounding that, the transport thereof. This is still a Schedule 6 substance that you are scheduling. So just like with any high scheduled medicine like Ritalin or Concerta, you can't just put it in a shipping container, put it overseas. I'm guessing maybe on your hemp permits, that would definitely work that way once you export tons. But with the medicinal product, we actually took us some time to go around identifying people. For example, one of the transport companies at OR Tambo, it took months of consultation and further development on their end, because as we assessed the situation, they were qualified to handle some medical substances, but naturally not all of them. First had to see where cannabis would fall. They need to update their facility and do the necessary SOPs on their side to actually be in a position to then legally transport it. So it does get technical, and there's also different service providers. And they all new, they all want to enter the space. So I do think it's also very important that those kinds of companies just ensure that wherever you fall within the chain of the cannabis business, you need to have some kind of documentation in place, because if you don't, you will be carrying some risk.
And that's the thing. I mean, any one of those factors could potentially compromise your, your final deal. And I mean, even things like, I suppose you've got a precaution for theft. You've got a precaution for deterioration during transport, currency fluctuations. I mean, it must
typical insurance, and that's one difficult thing. We really struggle to find companies willing to insure that, because it is high value product. And just like courier companies, very hesitant to even transport it, whether you're doing it by donation or not. They're almost too scared to even touch on the product. Especially now we're dealing with international shipping companies, and the laws of the countries where they're coming to and going to are two different things. And now they're shipping a product between countries with two different legislations and regulations surrounding the same product. So you kind of have this situation where you would need an expert level of international accreditation to be able to design a model for you that you would be comfortable with, putting your company's name and business name on the line for. And not many companies have gone that far and done the extra mile. So it's also a lot of the times when there is a shortage of a service, for example, and we then reach out to these internationally acclaimed companies, who's got a very reputable reputation in the cannabis industry, to then just turn around to say, but hey, we have never investigated South Africa as maybe as an expansion of our business. And even though you are telling us that this might be legal, until we from our side done that due diligence, we can't actually just go on it now. So yeah, it gets very difficult when you deal with international companies, and your multi-million rand investment is heavily now dependent on only these international organizations, since you can only export.
And then is in terms of, I want to make, I suppose, a slightly more positive outlook. I mean, there are off takes happening, right? We are shipping. I mean, they're not as newsworthy anymore. I know the first one was all over the news when there was so many tons of cannabis finally
I think that
legally
was
left.
Highlands Ventures. If I remember the name correctly, and it was also something close to like 8 tons, which in my mind might just say it wasn't necessarily the medicinal cannabis export market, because a lot of facilities really struggle to go, to grow 1,000 kilograms or a ton per harvest.
Yeah.
And some of these facilities have invested millions of rands and can only still cultivate up to 50 or 100 kgs of top quality indoor. So
tons a lot.
the international market also seems to be more quantity over quality driven. So it's very, very seldom that I get a query for a buyer that's only looking for 50 to 100 kilograms. It's usually like they want 500, 600, 700 kgs of the same strain, all of the same quality, which is very, very difficult
Consistent,
to meet that demand. You would almost need 5 licensed facilities all growing the same genetics together to meet the demand of the single offtake.
It's very unattractive for growers in sort of home growers that aspire to get to that medicinal, or that want to be a licensed grower, because everyone's like, oh, if I get a license, I can grow weed and sell it. It's like, it's actually, we've always we've always said to the guys, if you want to get into that space down the line, as a ordinary person now, that's what you have to do. Grow the same strain, grow it for productivity, not for aesthetics. You've got to analyze your costs. You've got to make sure you're figuring out, your grams per, everything, your lighting. It's all got to be optimized and consistent. Every single time has just be the same. It takes the fun out of what most growers are going to be growing for at a domestic level. It really doesn't paint an exciting picture of the legal market. Besides the bucks.
Definitely, you can see the frustration in a lot of these licensed facilities that are now in a position to legally grow, but they don't know what to grow, because for them now they're growing a product. Just in the meantime, they're looking for off-takers, and they could find 3 off-takers, but they started with the wrong product. Had they waited until they known what the off-taker wanted, you can. So it's almost difficult to say, I've got this product, and you're running around looking for a buyer, when in reality, the buyer's demands are very, very specific. So the product that they require is also very specific. And just because you went and, grew a different strain than these 3 off-takers that you knew they maybe would have wanted, then it is going to be frustrating. So I do understand why, so many people have reached out to me, and luckily because of that, I have been able to connect some individuals at the right place. But that really is currently, if you are a very well-connected person in that space, in the international space, and you could really benefit and really branch out business to South Africa. Because we've got a lot of facilities here literally on standby waiting to grow with proper licensing in place. But they don't have the connections to know who's the buyer and what's the product that they need.
Yeah. Well, guys, you heard it from Stefan himself. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure and always super interesting to learn a little bit more about the technical side of licensing and cannabis growing at sort of the large scale. Stefan, they can still find you at attorney420.co.za.
That's right. Or you can just send me an email at stefan@attorney420.co.za. Visit the website. Or if you just Google our law firm, SJF Attorneys, it will also pop up on the Legal Practice Council website. We are fully registered in it. So
Fantastic. Yeah, those details will also be down below. And Stefan, hopefully you'll be back with us again in another video. And thanks so much.
thank you so much, Andrew. Always a pleasure.